Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Finance Committee meeting. Please note this meeting will be recorded in its entirety. I will begin to conduct Commissioner roll call. Chair Gabriel Lopez.
Here.
Vice Chair Gilbert Casillas.
Present.
Committee Chair Dalia Contreras.
Present.
Commissioner Estrellita Garcia Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Janet Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Leela Powell. Commissioner Vincent Robinson.
Here.
Doug Ponick, Board of Commissioners Attorney.
I'm here.
President and CEO Ed Hinojosa Jr.
I'm here.
All right, you may call the meeting to order. Thank you.
Thank you. The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to, should we adjust the attendance roll call to welcome Commissioner? Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 5551.071.076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The Board of Committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the counsel of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Thank you. With no citizens signed up to speak, we'll go ahead and move on to individual item number 3. Consideration appropriate action regarding Resolution 6503, certifying that Opportunity Home investment policy and investment strategies have been reviewed in accordance with the requirements set forth in Section 2256.005E for the Texas Public Funds Investment Act. Chief Finance Officer and Director of Finance and Accounting.
Hi. So good afternoon. I'm going to turn over both of my presentations today to Aaron Sladek. He's Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. First item of the day is the investment policy. This policy is required by the Texas Public Funds Investment Act, and although there are no proposed changes to the policy at this time, the act does require an annual review by the governing body. So I'd just like to take a few moments to just go over the Investment Act. It has 5 primary objectives. The first 3 in order of priority are preservation of capital, liquidity, and yield. Preservation capital is centered on a conservative investment strategy. The primary goal is in the name. You're trying to preserve your capital, minimize loss in your portfolio. And really the way that we consider our efforts doing that is by focusing on very safe, very short-term investments, such as United States Treasury bills, which, as you know, are backed by full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Liquidity deals with how quickly these investments can be converted back to cash. So we want to have reserves available anytime, so we want to be able to quickly liquidate these if needed in order to pay vendors, pay payroll, any current debt service. HUD does require that any HUD source funds that we invest have to be liquidated within 1 day's notice. There's a 1-day notice period. So they're very highly liquid short-term investments. Yield, as we all know, is a measure of how much return. It's usually expressed as a percentage, and consistent with preservation of capital, which deals with risk and liquidity. Given 2 investments with similar liquidity, similar risk level, we would choose the one with the higher yield. The 4th objective of the policy is to satisfy legal limitations. So there's really 2 buckets of funds. We have HUD funds. For those, we have to comply with, there's a HUD notice, PIH 95-27, but that's from, you don't have to go back to 1995 to look that up. You can just refer to Attachment A of our investment policy. They're all listed there. And then for non-HUD funds, those are still considered public funds, so we have to conform to the Act itself. And the final objective is administrative cost. This just says that when we're reviewing investments, we have to consider the administrative cost of that, particularly with regard to investments of short duration. So the key here is just we have these investments need to be cost effective. We wouldn't want to spend a lot of staff time looking at investments that have a limited yield. Then finally, there's a prudent standard in the policy. It states that we'll invest these funds as a prudent person would handle their own affairs. So it's really just using a high level of judgment, high level of care when you're reviewing these investments and making decisions. So like I said, there's no proposed changes to the policy at this time. Just wanted to give you all that overview. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you so much. If there aren't any questions, we'll move on to discussion items.
I think we got to vote on that.
Oh, you're right, thank you. Do we have a motion to? So there aren't any changes, we're just readopting the resolution?
Yes.
What are we
typically
voting
do
on?
this like around the beginning of each year. Last year, very small change. It had referenced the old name, so we updated to Opportunity Home throughout. And then before last year, I think we hadn't updated in maybe 5 years, and it was just, I think if you look at the very last section, there was like an additional sentence we had. So usually these are very small changes. The act is very old. It's very prescriptive. So
Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're voting on certifying that we have reviewed this investment opportunity policy.
Yes,
And there are
Commissioner.
no changes to it. So do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept Resolution 6503.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, resolution moves forward. We're going to go ahead and move on to item number 4, update and discussion regarding the quarterly finance report. Will you be presenting that as well?
yes.
Great.
It's going to be. Might need a new prescription. I'll do my best because I did not print it out. I have my notes. But yeah, I'm pleased to present the quarterly financial report. This is for the 6 months ended December 31st, 2023. Just a reminder that we present 2 income statements to you all. The first deals with our operations, so includes our core housing programs of public housing, Section 8, and our Beacon communities. Also included in operations is our central office cost center, which is our management agent for our federal programs. And then finally, we have our resident engagement line of business. The second income statement is termed capital, and it includes our capital fund program grants as well as our real estate services lines of business. So we'll go ahead and go into operations. Yeah, still here. So the results for the 6 months ended December 31st, 2023 reflect a surplus before non-cash items of $5.2 million, which was $5.3 million above budget. Tenant revenue was $5.8 million below budget, and that stemmed from both public housing and Beacon. So in public housing, there was a $600,000 unfavorable variance due to a higher than expected bad debt expense. And in Beacon, there was a $5.2 million unfavorable variance, and that was attributable to some occupancy issues that that portfolio is still facing. There was one property, 100 Labor. It's a 213-unit property that we had budgeted for a full year of operations, but it only began leasing up around October due to construction delays. But there were just a handful of properties that are still struggling. The lowest one had around a 67% occupancy, all the way up to 80%, while the Beacon portfolio as a whole, if you exclude that 100 Labor property, is about 86%. Grant revenue was above budget by approximately $1 million. Section 8 administrative fees were $1.4 million above budget, and our project-based Section 8 HAP subsidies were $300,000 favorable due to contract rent increases. And the overall increase was partially offset by an unfavorable variance in public housing operating subsidy. Our proration is lower than we've seen in a very long time, 87%, which we haven't seen. The last we saw it that low was around 2014, and it was 88%. Moving on, HAP revenue was below budget by $8.3 million. Lease-up does continue to trend favorably, but it's slower than anticipated. But we do expect that as more HAP contracts are executed in the second half of the fiscal year, that this variance will decelerate. Moving on to expenses, salaries and benefits were $1 million below budget. Central office, Beacon, and resident engagement were favorable, while public housing and Section 8 were unfavorable due to a rise in staffing levels. I also wanted to note that due to timing of the budget preparation, the classification and compensation study was not able to be factored into that budget. However, we did include $2.4 million as an approved use of MTW funds this year because we do expect there eventually to be an overage in salaries. Next line item is ordinary maintenance and repairs. This was $6.9 million above budget, attributable to both public housing and Beacon. This is pretty much the same story as the last quarter. There's still a significant amount of make-readies and significant repairs in both the public housing and Beacon portfolios, in addition to supplies and materials and other contract costs in the Beacon segment. Other expenses were $1.1 million below budget, due primarily to technology and licensing fee savings of about $700,000 across the agency. Interest expense, moving into the non-operating income and expenses section, interest expense was $355,000 below budget due to the payoff of debt for 9 Beacon properties that occurred in April of 2023. Interest income was $1.2 million above budget due to a rise in interest rates. So our current depository agreement has us tied to the 13-week Treasury note, which is still paying currently over 5%. So we're gaining some significant interest with our funds deposited. And then other income expense was $5.9 million unfavorable due to MTW fund transfers for various note and construction draws. And then that last line item there in the non-operating income expense section is HUD held fund draws. You can see that was approximately $23.5 million above budget. And we used those funds to pay off Beacon debt of approximately $7.8 million. We also covered public housing and Beacon operating expenses of $5 million and $1.8 million, respectively. If these public housing operating losses do persist, we're going to cover them with MTW funds as authorized in our MTW contract. And then the remaining balance of that was used to support development costs of the Hunter Labor and Snowden projects. And then all of these MTW uses will be summarized in another following slide. But can we go ahead and go to the next slide? This is our capital segment. So once again, this is our capital fund program grants in real estate services.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
So
I have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
The HUD held funds, are those the HUD reserve funds?
Yes.
Are they the same thing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So just moving on to capital now. The capital segment produced a surplus before non-cash items of $12.8 million, which was $3.3 million above budget. Grant revenue was above budget by $3.5 million. This related primarily to CFP soft costs, which so when we're awarded a CFP grant, we're allowed to use up to 20% of that for management, so basically for operating expenses. And we had drawn 10% of that for the most recent CFP grants, but HUD permits us to actually draw up to 20%. So to help cover some of those public housing operating losses, we drew that additional 10% to pull us up to that 20%, which helped offset some of that loss. Miscellaneous revenue exceeded the budget by $935,000. This was a result of bond issuer fees earned by Los Alvarez Public Facility Corporation. These are one-time fees that they're able to earn. They're typically 1% to 2% of the bond amount that's issued, and then they usually get a $7,500 fee from then on out as long as the bonds are outstanding. Salaries and benefits were $326,000 below budget due to a favorable variance in real estate services. Ordinary maintenance and repairs was $298,000 above budget. This was due to CFP funds utilized for capital repairs and upgrades for various public housing properties. And then other expenses were above budget by $685,000. This was due to consulting expenses related to pre-development for the Alzon Courts expansion project, which were $300,000 higher. And additionally, we recognized a $400,000 bad debt expense. We had to loan some money to the Artisan at Salado partnership to supplement their operations, and we do not know with certainty that we will get that back, so we established an allowance account against that. And then once again, interest income was very favorable, $870,000 favorable, just to the unexpected increase in interest rates. And then lastly, other income and expenses were $1.3 million unfavorable. We funded an operating deficit of $500,000 and a disposition deficit of $1 million for the Costa Mirada partnership. Slide. So these graphs we're now presenting, this is a change up from last quarter where we presented 3 years of actuals. This is going to be a 2-year comparison, actual to budget. So I've already gone over actual versus budget, so I'd just like to speak a little bit about what transpired actual to actual last year. So in green, we see miscellaneous revenue, which was $2.8 million higher last fiscal year, and that was really due to a one-off kind of thing. We had a sale and resyndication of tax credits for the Rosemont at University Park property, and in that closing, we received net proceeds of about $3.6 million. HAP revenue in yellow is up about $1.5 million from last year. Grant revenue in red was up about $8.3 million due to timing of capital grant expenditures, as well as a drawdown of that additional 10% of CFP funds that I stated earlier. And tenant revenue in blue was $2.5 million higher. We acquired 2 new properties during the period, Mid-Crown and the Ravello, so that added some tenant revenue. Next slide, please. These are our consolidated operating expenses. Same thing, it's a 2-year comparison, actual to budget. HAP expense in orange was up $9.2 million compared to last fiscal year. And this increase was twofold. It was due to an increase in payment standards as well as an increase in lease up. Other expenses in green there was up $2.3 million. This was primarily due to an increase in protective services, insurance, and bad debt. Utilities in yellow was up slightly, $600,000 due to rate increases. Ordinary maintenance in red was up $6.6 million. Again, this was due to make-readies, supplies, and materials in both the public housing and Beacon segments. And salaries and benefits in blue is up $5.9 million, and this is due to both the classification and compensation study and a rise in staffing levels. Next slide, please. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Like money can move around within those phases. Can all of that be moved around like that, or just because when we look at this, you're seeing overall, like for this year, right, or FY24, actual was a little more than budgeted. If you go over on one line item, can you pull funds from another line item that might have been under, or are there restrictions within those line items?
So absolutely, we consider total budget when we talk about variances. We may bring folks in and talk about specific line items if there's anything they could do to make some sort of course correction.
Okay.
But generally speaking, we're looking at a total.
Total. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Next slide, please. The next 2 slides are going to be graphs or charts for our, and these represent our balance sheet. So this first one is a debt to equity ratio. You can see that it decreased from 0.45 to 0.39, which is a great thing. The lower rate the ratio, the better. And anything under 1 signifies a strong solvency position. The debt in red, you can see a decrease there of approximately $6 million, and that was due to payoff of the Sendero bonds. Those were paid off in December. They were set to mature in January, so they were paid off just shortly before maturity. And then you also see a very significant equity decrease there. Equity in yellow increased 41 million, and really that's attributable to both increases in net capital assets as well as reductions in debt. Those two things play together and they increase your equity. Next slide, please. And these next two are related to current ratio. This is simply current assets divided by current liabilities. You can see a decrease, a rather significant decrease in current liabilities of 12 million. But this chart really displays how important that numerator is, the debt, because it only decreased 3 million, yet you can see that the ratio only went down 3 basis points, so it remained relatively stable. That's a very high ratio. We're looking for anything over 2, so this is extremely good. Next slide. This is the moving to work usage schedule that I referred to earlier. You can see the public housing operating shortfall there of 5 million, as well as the Beacon intercompany pay down of 1.8 million. We contributed to both the Costa Valencia and Highland Park properties. As far as debt pay downs, we paid approximately 7.8 million, as I mentioned earlier. So you can see that broken out between the $500,000 Veracruz loan payoff and the 7.3 million Sendero bond payoff. And the bulk of the residual was used for development at both the 100 Labor property and Snowden. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to mention that there's also a cash and investment summary included in your packet. Just to be brief, the overall cash investment balance over the last quarter decreased by 4.5 million, primarily due to Beacon and public housing operations. And we also include a separate grants report, which summarizes grant activities. And then I just wanted to speak real briefly on the federal funding environment. So January 18th, both houses, or both chambers of Congress, they passed a continuing resolution to avert a partial government shutdown. They have until March 1st, 2024 to pass the HUD appropriation bill. If that does not happen, the going thought out there is that it would likely trigger substantial cuts if they're not able to figure out that the full year appropriations by that date. Diana mentioned that we received a letter earlier today that says we would receive, in the event of a shutdown, we would receive our April Section 8 funding, but there is more uncertainty with what would happen with our public housing funding if that shutdown were to occur. Questions?
Do we already have contingency plans built for if we had to trigger a substantial cut? I know this is an annual issue, but.
Right, so if we had actual funding cuts, then that would trigger a budget review, a budget revision. But for a more of a short term, we plan for that pretty regularly because we haven't had a budget. And
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I think it was in 2011 that sequestration occurred, and Diana and the finance team worked with operations to identify how we would adjust for that. So we would follow a similar process at that point if there was actual funding cuts.
That's not too far from now, right? March 8th. Like, would we know then, March 8th, if we needed to start planning for?
Well, that's if both House of Congress can agree to, right?
The first. Okay.
So we've been dealing with continuing resolutions for forever. So,
Okay.
and they've typically been funding at about, the previous year's level. So we could sort of expect that. But what was unexpected was the 87% proration they've been funding public housing at this year. And it was unexpected. I don't, we just didn't expect it. I went back and looked at my documentation. And I could not find, other than 2014, any, besides sequestration funding, anything funded that low. So, and at $30 million, it's a little bit of a struggle. But we do have the HUD held reserves to rely on at that point, and just knowing that we'd have to set that amount of money aside on an annual basis, the additional amount, right? The 13%. Mm-hmm. If they truly stick with that 87%. What's odd is that they're both HUD, right? Section 8 and public housing, and the Section 8 funding has been basically at 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a quick question about the tenant revenue, which we've discussed before here. It looks like we were about $4 million below 2 fiscal years ago and about $5 million below last fiscal year. So I understand there are a couple components of that. One is vacancy of units that were projected to be leased at a higher rate, or that were not online at all in order to be leased, and the other is non-payment. And I understand we're taking actions in both of those areas. So we have some properties that were at very low rates of occupancy have exited the portfolio. And then we are taking action on the non-payment trends. I just wanted a little reassurance that we've adjusted our projections, because I know that these trends are not at all unique to our portfolio, that other multifamily providers in the community are seeing these same trends. And at some point, to get an update on where we are with either moving folks out of units who are resolved not to pay, or recovering some of the back rent that's owed.
So as part of the budgeting process, the finance and operations teams are reviewing all of that, and the budgets, they're already going through significant review internally, and those come to the board they come to this committee in May. And we have tended to hold a workshop so that we can review and dive into the details of that type of thing and answer any questions. And Diana probably has something to add.
So this year, Melissa, the director of Beacon, took a deep dive into each individual property, where the rents were set. So she's done some significant analysis and has provided those new numbers for us for the 25 fiscal year. So we're hopeful.
The reason I ask that is that I'm hearing from other nonprofit multifamily providers that this is a unique combination of occupancy rates and non-payment, and that they've never seen this type of scenario before, so that they couldn't adequately project. They had no past example of this type of environment to budget around.
Correct. Post-COVID, it's been terrible. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk about some of the policy issues that led us into this position at some point, if we have a chance to discuss that. Not our policy, other people's policies.
Diana, a quick question. Being that we have a surplus in certain areas in the budget where there's additional monies, and we're near the end of the fiscal year, could there be monies that could be moved and presented to the board for approval to upgrade some of the security and cameras and adding the additional cameras in all our senior disabled properties that weren't placed there in the upgrade of the new systems? Is that possible?
So our budget funding is different from like government funding, so it doesn't roll over. Like if there's extra funds, a surplus left, it doesn't roll over into the next year's budget. I think there's quite a bit of work being done with the operations right now for projecting next year, and I know there's some discussion about security and the level of security we provide. The operations is already forecasted to run a significant deficit next year, as it is this year. So that's a big challenge that we'll have to face and also discuss with the board when we bring the budgets back to the committee.
We're looking at $9 million shortfall?
The shortfall of 18 million.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Without any questions, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5, update and discussion regarding the quarterly internal audit report. We don't have to vote on 4, right? Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Allison Schlegel, and I'm the Director of Internal Audit. And today we will be reviewing the Quarter 3 activities for internal audit. So for fiscal year 23-24, IA has reviewed a total of 4 escrows over $5,000 for a total of $31,553.52, and that's an average escrow of $7,888.38. We also reviewed 2 poured-out escrows, and that was a total of $8,580. If we can move on to the next slide.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Can you tell me what a poured-out escrow is?
Yes, so it's families moving to another housing agency.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So for 22-23, we did complete one other audit. It was the public housing waitlist eligibility and admissions process. The fieldwork is completed. The draft report has also been completed, and the exit conference was scheduled for February 29th of this year. Moving on to the next slide. For 23-24, we had the audit of procurement, the oversight of vendor compliance for Section 3 and small minority and women-owned business enterprises, also known as SWIMBY. The audit was kicked off on August the 28th. The fieldwork has been completed. The draft report was sent off to the Director of Procurement, and the exit conference was held on February 9th. We are currently awaiting management responses on 8 findings and 4 observations as a result of that audit. The next slide, we have the audit of asset management, the financing and refinancing of real estate assets. So this audit was part of the board-approved internal audit plan for 23-24. However, due to the changes in management for asset management, it was deemed necessary to conduct a controlled self-assessment for the financing and refinancing of assets. So the CSA, or the controlled self-assessment, will facilitate the creation of standard operating procedures that include internal processes related to the financing and refinancing of assets. There will be a series of workshops included in the CSA that internal audit will host, and the first one is to begin on February 27th. And then we will revisit the completion of an audit at a later date. The next audit is the audit of human resources and recruitment process. So this audit was kicked off on February 5th, and fieldwork is currently underway. So we'll be reviewing the marketing, interviewing, the selection documentation, and background check processes and procedures, and we'll do a sample size. It says 10%, however, with 10% of the information that was sent from human resources, it wasn't going to be it was going to be maybe 20, so internal audit is going to do 30 of the applicant samples instead. So that applicant size is going to be from January 1st of 2023 to December 31st. And the audit's also going to contain a review for equity, diversion, and inclusion. And we'll be working with the policy and planning team and the director of EDI for that one as well. For our compliance audits, the assistant housing program completed a total of 455 file reviews from July 1st through January 31st. Public housing completed 29 public housing and mixed income communities for a total of 316 files. And then the Beacon and Partnerships completed 24 Beacon community reviews for 376 files and 3 partnership properties for a total of 60 files. The current action items, you all received the action items in your packet. So currently there are 6 open action items. 2 of them are pending a review and approval of an SOP. 2 of them are also pending the retraining of staff to ensure all policies and procedures are followed. And then 1 is pending the update of the pre-eligibility application to ensure the registered sex offender portion of the application is consistently completed. And then the last one is pending the updated verification consent forms. So we will have 2 third-party audits coming up. One of them is going to be the comprehension compliance review, and that's going to be conducted by HUD. HUD will be on site May 13th through the 17th, and they will review the PHA operations, management, financial condition, physical condition, and governance. The HUD staff will assess the public housing's program, the PHA's program performance in compliance with HUD requirements and regulations by setting monitoring priorities on site and remote reviews. So we are in the process right now of getting all the stuff contained into one packet to send to HUD for remote review. The second third-party audit is also going to be completed by HUD. This is going to be the Emergency Housing Voucher Program Financial and Program Review. This one is going to be conducted by the Quality Assurance Division of HUD, and that's going to kick off on June 24th. So HUD will be on site beginning June 24th, and they anticipate to conclude the audit on June the 28th. Opportunity Home will be required to provide financial and program data related to the operation of the EHV program. Before I go into any questions, I do want to let you know that we have began the fiscal year 24-25 risk assessment process. So the next meeting in May will have the results of that risk assessment.
Great.
Any questions?
I have a question on the audit for public housing waitlist eligibility and admissions. Teach me, what is an exit conference?
So an exit conference is once all our field work is completed and we get all our findings and observations together in one report. We have a meeting with the director of the program, the ELT staff member who's responsible for that operations, myself, the person who conducted the audit, and then the chief administrative officer. And we go through all the findings together, ask if they have any questions or concerns, and then once we have that conference, then the report is sent to the director of the program so he can provide his management responses to the findings and observations.
And does the board ever see the reports?
Yes, I send them to you as soon as they're completed.
Okay, awesome. Because that's one, I think there's been a lot of questions about the wait list, right? So I feel like that's one that could help clarify.
Yes.
Especially letting people know that we audited it and there's findings and all that.
That was actually my question with, was there an appropriate avenue for the board, either in committee or at a Board of Commissioners meeting, to get a report on that process? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yes, the final reports are sent to you, the Finance Committee, as soon as they're completed.
Yeah. And I remember those coming out, we got them a few months ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions?
I do have one question about the comprehensive compliance review in May. There's a governance item listed. Will the commissioners be engaged in any way in that component of the comprehensive compliance review?
We can certainly invite commissioners to the entrance and exit conferences if there's a desire for that. HUD has not, generally they let us know if they'd like commissioners there, and they've not indicated at this point. It's a very operational review, and the last time they've done something like this, I think, was about 8 years ago or so, 10 years ago. Muriel and Diana are shaking their heads, so it's been a while. And they do this with all the housing authorities, but they have a small team, so it takes them a while to cycle through.
I don't need any more meetings. I was just curious as to whether they were going to reach out to us or not.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. With the completion of those items, I will adjourn the the Finance Committee meeting and pass it over to the Operation and Real Estate Committee.
Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. Do we need to do roll call again, Doug?
We don't if we don't have a break and anyone leaving, but we just have one commissioner leave. So I would just note for the record that all are present except for the commissioner who just stepped out but will be returning.
Thank you. You may begin the meeting.
The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The board or committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Moving to our individual item. Number 3, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6504, authorizing the award of contracts for temporary and contract personnel services to Dependable Business Solutions, DBA Dependable Staffing, Wren Hill Staffing Services of Texas, and Remedy Intelligence Staffing for an annual cumulative amount not to exceed $2 million for a period of 1 year and with the option to renew up to 4 additional 1-year terms. George Ayala, Director of Procurement, and Ayana Longoria, Director of Human Resources.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you. As you may recall, the board approved an item in September that was authorizing the award of 4 contracts for temporary and contract personnel services. This is the companion to that award. In the past, when we've had temporary service contracts, we generally have between 7 and 8 vendors that provide us with temp services. So our first contract awarded 4, and in this contract, we're seeking to award the remaining. That way, we have enough temporary service personnel providers to provide us with options and to provide different services, as they all may have different specialties and different types of temps that they provide. As always, this is just to provide temporary service personnel for vacant positions that on a short-term basis while we're advertising and seeking for candidates to go through the process. Our temp services have been very successful in the last couple of years as we've been able to utilize these temporary services to transition into full-time employment. So we're very fortunate that we've had really good temps and really great work with our contract providers. And as always, we will only utilize this contract for budgeted positions. So they have to be on the staffing budget in order for us to utilize these contracts for temporary services. With that, I will turn it over to George, who will talk about the procurement process.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. With regards to the procurement process, this solicitation was started in December 4th of 2023. Opportunity Home issued a request for proposals for temporary and contract personnel services, which closed on January 5th of this year. The RFP was published on multiple websites, directly solicited to 492 vendors, which 37 vendors responded. The evaluation criteria included experience, capacity, quality plan and approach, response time, price proposal, and the strength of Section 3 and SWMB utilization plans. As you heard, staff is recommending the contract award to the 3 highest rated respondents. The financial impact of this solicitation, this award will be not to exceed of $2 million. And the award includes temporary and contract personnel services. Any questions?
I have a quick question. Just remind me, do we have a pathway for folks who come on as temps to become full-time employees?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely, we do. That is one of the things that has proven to be most successful utilizing these services. That we do have an opportunity to work with staff and through their provisional period through the staffing company, and then transition them once they've completed their hours.
I have a question. Over 5 years, do we actually need $10 million for temporary staffing? That could be used in other areas of need?
No, sir. As we noted, this is on a as-needed basis, and it's only for those budgeted positions. So whenever we have that opening, this is when we have the opportunity to go out and try out new employees and then process them into the organization.
So basically, the 2 million we're approving, it's not 10 million, it's 2 million that can be moved over for 4 additional years.
That's a budget question. You can move personnel budget to other things, right?
So it's 2 million per year then?
So the contract is up to
Up to
$2
$2 million per
So
year.
that doesn't, we cannot exceed that amount unless we bring it back to the board. However, like I mentioned, it's only for budgeted positions. So if the budget's not included for that position itself, then we won't be able to use it.
Thank you. Call for a motion.
I motion we approve item number 3.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6506, authorizing the award of a contract for background investigation services to Online Rental Exchange through Housing Authority of the City of Charleston for an annual cumulative amount not to exceed $1 million for a period of 1 year, with the option to renew up to 4 additional 1-year terms. George Ayala and Brandy Perez.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So what we are seeking is your approval to approve the online rental exchange. We use this for all of our federal housing programs, and this is to run our background checks as well as our income verification during the eligibility as well as the recertification process. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to George to discuss the procurement process.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As the Chair mentioned, we are recommending the award of a contract for background screening service to Online Rental Exchange. This is utilizing the interagency agreement with the Housing Authority of the City of Charleston. On April 5th, 2023, the Housing Authority of the City of Charleston issued a request for proposal for background screening services that closed on April 20th of 2023 and awarded Online Rental Exchange on July 25th of 2023. The use of cooperative and interagency agreements is encouraged by HUD to simplify and expedite the procurement process so long as it complies with Opportunity Homes procurement policies. The financial impact of this award is not expected to exceed $1 million, and this award includes reports that provide up-to-date applicant resident criminal history and employment income verification services. Questions?
My only question is, because it's background check stuff, I'm assuming that Charleston, Texas, doesn't matter that they'd be able to meet whatever local requirements we have?
So we just get the information about their background, but we still use our own screening criteria on our background criteria that we're looking at, because that will vary between different housing authorities. And so, which we've discussed in the past, our background and how we've become a little bit more flexible, knowing that there have been some biases in the past regarding the criminal justice.
Thank you.
Just a quick clarification. So the Charleston PHA is contracting with a national organization to do this, and we're just piggybacking on that because it was open in the system.
Yes, ma'am. So we're piggybacking on the solicitation itself, the use of the solicitation out of the services. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Call for a motion.
I move Resolution 6506 get approved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Move on to item number 5. Consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6505, authorizing the sale of the Artisan at Salado Falls Apartments and the contribution of funds to pay off debt and operating deficits and other matters in connection therewith. Miranda Castro, Director of Asset Management.
It's me again. Hello. I am respectfully requesting that we cover this item in closed session. In specific, I am requesting authorization to proceed with the disposition of this property, but we can go into details if you are in alignment in closed session. Thank you.
We will defer this matter to closed session. If you can show on the roll call that the commissioner has joined us in the meeting. Item number 6, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6507, authorizing the submission of a disposition application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the site known as Lavaca Street vacant parcels and subsequent sale, the execution of documents necessary to consummate such actions and other matters in connection therewith. Susan Ramos Sossman, Interim Director of Development Services and Neighborhood Revitalization.
Good afternoon. So today we're seeking approval for Resolution 6507. And like you mentioned, it's so that we can submit our application for disposition to HUD. Once we submit that application and it gets approved, we can move forward with the construction of a proposed parking lot that will be utilized by, that may be utilized by the commercial tenants from 100 Labor. So the first slide should be a map. Yeah. So the land is located west of 37 on 331 Lavaca Street, and the second parcel is located on the corner of Labor and Lavaca. And like I mentioned, it's across the street from a 100 Labor. It's located in the regional center, close to, in the heart of downtown, and easy accessible to Medical Center, Brooks, and Midtown. Specifics on this project include, so the parcels are tiny. The acres are 0.2111. Estimated construction costs from a previous proposal is approximately $486,000. And if we move forward to construct the parking lot, we expect to yield around 37 spaces. So that being said, if you approve the resolution today, we will move forward with the disposition application as soon as we complete the environmental reviews. Any questions?
I think the only question I have with this is once we convert it into a parking lot, there's new ongoing costs associated with it being a parking lot, and I'm assuming we're saying, yes, we're going to go down this path. We know how much it's going to cost us long term, which is not nothing, and that's being worked into the feasibility financially.
Yes, it is. We're actually, as Susan mentioned, it's really for the retail space that we have at 100 Labor that we're trying to lease up. And so part of that, we're working with the broker to make sure that it also includes ongoing costs for the maintenance of the parking lot. The retail space, yes.
Following up with just is there any chance HUD won't approve this? And second, I would assume that security for that site has also been factored into your planning for lighting and the other environmental design of the site.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Yes, we know that there's a lot of conversations around the Lavaca neighborhood and making sure, and so this piece of land that Susan showed it's actually in between Victoria Plaza, which are existing, and the 100 Labor. And so anything that we're doing and designing, we make sure that there's enough lighting. We're also looking, I think, at some of the proposals that it would be like an access gate to get in there, so it really is utilized for the retail or potential other uses that we've been talking about.
And then in regards to HUD's approval, we would expect that they would approve that the land has been vacant, and we know that that is an opportunity for crime and for loitering, and so making use of that property, I think, would be beneficial.
Also talking about the use of the parking lot, because of the Alamo Dome and the events that happen and everything, people using parking lots or finding parking spaces to be able to go to the events, would we maybe be charging people to use that lot? Or, because if there's an access gate, they can get a ticket paid to come out or whatever, it would get full with the people going to the Alamo Dome, and then the people needing to use it for the tenants at 100 Labor would maybe cause a problem.
It's to be used for the commercial tenants, and so that would be whichever businesses do lease up. And so, we would look into that in the future, and we appreciate your comments so that we can make sure that we're considering it.
Because we do know that it happens in parking lots all around there that,
Correct.
and they're not for that use. So, thank you. If there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
A second.
Actually, yeah, Resolution 6507.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
We'll move on to discussion items. Item number 7, discussion regarding Opportunity Home recruitment and staffing update. Ayana Longoria, Director of Human Resources.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be presenting this to you today. We'll be going through our year-to-date headcount, looking at what our total headcount is to the variance and what is actual vacancies, our staffing by departments, and then our recruitment processes and our recruitment activity. So where we're starting off at the beginning of the fiscal year, we started with 546 full-time employees. We've brought on 92. Unfortunately, we've lost 52, but we're still ahead with a total headcount right now of 586. And that's at the end of December 31st, so ending out our year. So as I mentioned, we have 696 budgeted positions, and we've removed those 586 that are filled, and that leaves our variance at 110. But now I'm going to break down the variance for you. Next slide. So on the variance, we have positions that are on hold. And so right now, at the time of 12/31, we had about 24 positions on hold. And so these are positions that are not going to be filled for various reasons. It could be that the hiring official is not ready to fill the vacancy. There may not be, maybe they're a good candidate and they're waiting for other things to materialize. Or in some cases, what tends to happen is we have budgeted positions, as in the case of Beacon, where we were anticipating properties coming online and they don't end up coming online, but we do have those positions budgeted. We're not going to fill them. So we have to remove those from that variance. And then we look at the temp status, our working out of class, and then our interims and our pre-screens. And so those are ones that we know are coming in. And so at the end of December, we had 60. And again, it's a combination of all of those temps working out of class and pre-screens. So that leaves our actual vacancies at 26, which was amazing. Next slide, please. And so with this tiny, tiny print, you'll be able to see through each department where those holds are, where the vacancies are. But I do want to point out that where we our operations support, that one is trending a little high, and that's our customer service. We still have Beacon on here, and we still have public housing on here. Those are, again, are generally high turnover positions in our maintenance. But again, we're in the single digits, which is a big change from where we've been trending up until now. Next slide. So talking a little bit about the recruitment process, is that, as I mentioned, we have 20 formal promotions, and these are wonderful opportunities where we're able to have staff move up. We have 3 that are currently working out of class. And again, this is an opportunity for a person to apply for a promotion, try a position. Again, they'll be working out of class for up to 90 days. And it gives them an opportunity to prove that they can do the job and then retain the position. If it doesn't work out, they can always move back to the position position that they vacated. So again, it's a really great opportunity for an employee to try out a position and see if they're a good match for it. As I mentioned, I wanted to talk a little bit about our temporary status activity. We had 54 active temporary status employees, 6 project temps, and throughout the year we've had 68 transition from that temporary status to full-time hire. As I mentioned, it's been a really great partnership and opportunity to work with temporary status employees. And one of the big changes for December, going into December, that November time period, is that we, as we begin to look at the holiday closure that we have, we really begin to look at our temps and determine which ones are going to be good candidates to move forward and stay with us, because we know what often happens is during the closure, that week off doesn't seem like a lot, but if somebody's not working, that means they might be looking elsewhere. So for those that were good fits and we want to make sure that we retain them through the holidays, we work with our hiring managers, again, to work through that recruitment process and see if we can keep them. And so this year, going from November to December, we actually converted 18 temporary status employees to full-time. So some of our recruitment activity, again, we usually talk about doing a Santikos campaign or a radio campaign. We haven't had to do any of that, again, just because our numbers and the candidates that we're getting right now have been really great. But we are still participating in job fairs. We want to make sure that we're getting out in our community. So we worked with the San Antonio Apartment Association job fair back in October, and then a community options career fair. And again, just an opportunity to see what else is out there, meet prospective candidates, and then, of course, networking is going to be really important to continue to get our name out there. And one of the networking partnerships that we established was with a company called Miles Education. And they're a very interesting organization, but they basically are a company that works with students from abroad, so traditionally from India, but they could be from other countries. But they're studying here in the United States, and they are specifically studying in a STEM degree that would qualify them for a visa to work here. So through this partnership, they would basically help us place specifically finance and accounting positions. So this is something we're exploring, as those accounting and finance positions have been traditionally difficult to fill. But again, we've gotten some really great candidates, so this is just something that we're exploring and wanting to make sure we keep it as an option. And the next thing is we participated in a symposium with the St. Philip's Allied Construction Trades. And this is something that came to us through the Ready to Work San Antonio, as St. Philip's is one of the partners, and they have an allied construction trades group where they are training young people in construction trades. They're getting them certifications. Where we're trying to make a partnership with them is either to be a placement site for those students to come do practicum with us or as interns. So we're exploring the viability of that right now. We're still exploring and seeing how we can make that happen. But we did present to their students at this symposium to talk about our jobs and the career opportunities and the wonderful opportunities that we have here at Opportunity Homes. So again, just continuing to get our name out there and continuing to network. Are there any questions?
I remember when the reports were
Yeah,
a lot scarier.
a lot different.
Great job. I know y'all
No.
tried a lot in this. You really tried to be pretty innovative, so.
Just FYI, this morning I had an opportunity to meet with the gentleman that left. Y'all made adjustments for recruiting adjustments, and they came back, and they've been pleased. They've been back with us 4 years, I think he said.
Mm-hmm.
So it's appreciated.
Congratulations. I know the job market is still very tumultuous, so this is great news.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Counselor, if you'll move us into close.
Yes, sir. The board will be convening in closed session under sections 551.071 and 551.072 regarding, from the Texas Government Code, regarding the following matters: consultation with attorney and discussion regarding Petranco Apartments development, discussion with attorney regarding the sale and contribution of funds for artisan at Salado Falls Apartments, and discussion with attorney regarding properties overseen by asset management. The time is 2:06. Do you want to make the announcement that we're back in, or do you want Davlin to do it?
Hello and welcome back to the Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting of Opportunity Homes San Antonio. The time is 3:23.
Right. Action item 5, consideration and appropriate action regarding resolution 6505, authorizing the sale of the Artisan at Salado Falls Apartments and the contribution of funds to pay off debt and operating deficits and other matters in connection therewith. Miranda?
Yes, Commissioner. So regarding this property, we are requesting permission to sell the property as well as put funds in per the conversation that we had in closed session. I would respectfully ask that that be moved forward to the board.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 6505 to the board meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This time I'll adjourn our operations meeting.